Thank you. Thank you all for joining in. This is Manas, and we are having a wonderful morning in Bangalore. A very sunny morning. Weather looks great, but the traffic wasn't. So we just managed to reach the venue in nick of time. My name is Manas Dasgupta, and I'm the chairperson of the BCIC IT and Cybersecurity Expert Committee, apart from my day job as the founder and CEO of Teksands, a talent solutions organization. With me, we have our guest of honor today, Arturo Caines from the US. And Arturo is the CEO and founder of Lexicon Networks Incorporated. Lexicon is a global organization, global information technology solutions provider based out of Chicago. And they also have an offshore development center in Pune. And they also have their offices in California and Ontario. It's a consultancy enabling companies to bridge the digital divide in the areas of application integration, mobile web application development, AI across North America and APAC region. He's also the CEO of MaxGrad, a software startup focused on post-secondary education, and has got a background in managing operations and vendor relations in multinational companies like Macro Reports and Since Connectors Incorporated. I'm not sure whether pronunciations are correct. All right. Thank you. All right, and he has his hobby in farming and residing in Chicago land area and farms garlic and other instruments. So that's wonderful. Nice to have you, Arturo, and we also have Sushama with us from the Great Lakes Trade Office, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Right. Thank you. Welcome. We welcome the delegation. With that, we will start off. Arturo is going to talk extensively today about digital transformation with some focus on artificial intelligence. And we will first listen from Arturo about, and he will take us through a presentation on digital transformation, including artificial intelligence application in digital transformation. And after Arturo's presentation, we will move over to question and answer. We will have some question for him, and we will also take some question from the audience. So with that, over to you, Arturo.
Well, thank you, Manas, and thank you, Sushama, for this opportunity to present to the Bangalore Chamber of Commerce. And thank you to all in the audience. I look forward to making this a little bit entertaining, and hopefully you will learn something new today and something you can share with others as well. Yeah, so today I will be talking primarily about digital transformations. And basically, digital transformations have been going on for the last 25 years. And when we talk about digital transformations, a lot of people have different ideas, right? And now with the advent of AI, it even sort of makes it even more challenging how to address digital transformation. Yeah, so we already did my introduction, my information is here, so we'll go to the next slide. Okay. Yeah, so what I wanted to do was to start with the ramifications of not being able to iterate or not being able to make changes as our economy changes, as technology changes, as the needs of the market change. So I put this slide here is what a difference a decade makes, right? Why? Because, if you think the biggest retailer in the United States was Walmart, but today it's Amazon, even before they had their stores, right? The biggest hotelier in the United States was Wyndham, right? But today it's Airbnb, right? In the United States, the biggest, movie renter was Blockbuster, and today it's Netflix, right? We used to have yellow cabs. You had to pay over $100,000 for a yellow cab license. Today, all you need to do is, register on a website with Uber, right? And then, we have media, right? So before Facebook started generating content and providing, some level of news, you had the New York Times and you had all these newspapers, right, providing news. So you see how the landscape changed, right? And this exponential growth of productivity, information sharing, mobility, collaboration is reshaping business the world over. at a speed that has not been seen before. Right? So really, when you think about Blockbuster and Netflix, right? It's entertainment. It's not just for you, where you want it, right? Because you can have it on your mobile device, on your tablet, on your computer, right? It's also when you want it, but it's also localized. Netflix today here in India is producing content in local state languages. Think about it, right? So they went from thinking, hey, you know what? They came up with the idea that they would be about finding movies you love, which in fact has nothing to do with how you choose to receive them, because it's multi-channel, right? But what they didn't know when they started Netflix was the fact that they would be producing their own content, right? Because the biggest challenge Netflix had was syndication. They had to go to Disney, they had to go to Paramount, they had to go to Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, they had to go to all these people who were distributors of content that they produce, and they had to pay them a premium in order to have those titles at their disposal. But as the market changed, they changed, and they say, you know what, we should be producing our own content. And today, some of the best shows that everybody talks about are being produced by Netflix. And they're being localized across the globe, in the United States, here in India, where their biggest markets are. So it's a complete dynamic change from looking out to now looking in. And now they have others that want to use their content to put it on their platforms. So they reversed the tables completely, simply because they had a vision, right? And they leveraged the change in I would say the change in consumer behavior to their advantage. So there's a really interesting slide, right? So if you look in the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, right, that old model was, if you're big, you can just take over the small, right? Then in the 60s and 70s and 80s, that started changing. They say, hey, you need to be nimble, you need to be fast, right? And if you're nimble and fast, then maybe you can outsmart the large companies, right? And typically, if you look, in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, the average lifespan of a large company was 60 years. But then in the 60s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, the average lifespan of a large company was 30 years. Now, when you got into the 70s, 80s, and 90s, the average lifespan of a company is 18 years. And now it's not about being nimble or about being large, it's about how innovative you are, how fast you can adapt to a changing marketplace, right? And also, you have to consider mergers and acquisitions, right? There's a lot of mergers and acquisitions, and sometimes they might not be the right way, because a lot of people try to grow through acquisition, but sometimes that might not be the best approach, right? So I'm going to cover a case study today where I'm going to show that specifically. So let's talk now a little bit about digital transformation. How do we define digital transformation, right? So digital transformation is the process of integrating digital technologies into all parts of an organization, such as products, services, or operations, to deliver value to your customers. That's the ultimate goal, is delivering value to your customers, right? But it doesn't stop there, right? It may require new business models, new ways of thinking, a cultural change within the company, right? The challenge to the resistance to change, many people don't want to change, right? So in essence, that's a cultural change, right? And the other thing that we have to learn is to fail often. People don't like to hear the word fail, but sometimes failing is how we learn, right? So basically, by failing often, we can retain what works, and then we can iterate on top of it. Yeah. So I put a play here on colors and words. So we have digital case studies, but we also have transformational challenges, right? So in essence, it's a digital transformation challenge, but I'm going to go through it in case studies. So everybody knows Kodak, right? Corporation. So Kodak, right? They were a corporation that dominated the film space. Everybody that needed to buy film purchased it from Kodak. Kodak had cameras. They had these little boxes, right? Cameras. So basically, when you looked at Kodak, they dominated the space. And you had a small entrant from Japan called Fujifilm that started trying to compete with them on the film space, right? So in essence, when smartphones started to come in and phones started to come in, and basically you can see here in the gray, those are phones, handsets. So they thought that, you know, this is a passing fad, right? This digital thing, you know, it doesn't have resolution, right? It's cumbersome. They looked at all the barriers. They didn't look at the future, right? So what started happening was, you know, with the introduction of the iPhone in the mid 2000s, where people had super cameras, you know, you're able to save images, you're able to do video, you can see what happens to Kodak. Everybody went from having to have a camera with film to having to worry about 24 exposures or 32 pictures if you wanted the larger one. So now they can take as many pictures as they want, and they can delete the ones they don't want and keep the ones that they want, right? So it changed the entire dynamic of the marketplace. And what did Kodak do? They're saying, no, it's just a passing fad, right? And you can see in the chart the fact that as from 2006 onwards, as handsets became more and more prevalent, Kodak lost more and more market share. By the time they tried to react back in 2010, 2011, it was too late. They tried to produce their own SLR cameras, right? They never leveraged any of the internal chemical technologies that they had. They basically wound up outsourcing or selling off a lot of the modules that they had where they could have innovated. They had one of the best chemical labs. They had some of the best photo sensors in the market, but they never leveraged those for anything outside of what they were doing as a core, right? So what happened to them? They went bankrupt. So now we go to Fujifilm, and it was a completely different story, right? So Fuji saw that, you know, yes, they were trying to compete with Kodak, but at the same time, they saw that, hey, you know what, all these handsets are coming into the market, and, you know, they're challenging our space. So what did Fuji do? They went back and they said, hey, you know what? It's inevitable. This digital disruption is coming, and we need to find a way to reinvent ourselves and diversify. So what did Fuji do? Basically, they leveraged its core strength in film and chemicals to explore new avenues of growth, right? The company's deep expertise in material science and imaging technology served as a springboard for innovation, right? They basically, what they did was they invested in some new technologies, but they used their internal core technologies to develop new products. So where are they today? Today, because of that different mentality of embracing the change, they have materials, advanced materials, they have pharmaceuticals, right? They do a lot in the cosmetic care space, right? They have SLR cameras using some sensors, you know, that are way beyond, you know, how would I say, the density or digital density of those sensors is tremendous. You know, they've been able to sell that to other camera companies, right? And they basically diversified their portfolio, right? And by diversifying their portfolio to these different areas, whether it's cameras, you know, film, material science, cosmetics, right now they're able to be more stable. If one market segment, you know, really goes sideways, their company is not as much at risk as before. So diversification is key. Embracing the change is key. And in order to do that, company culture is critical. So here, I'm going to cover this one. This is a really interesting, I would call it a fight night. So basically, you know, the CRM space has been a battleground here for the last 15 years, right? And there used to be a product called Siebel, or there still is. It's owned by Oracle. Right, and there was an early entrant called Salesforce, right? And here we have Tim Hurd and Mark Benioff, and they squared it off right back in the mid 2000s, right? So basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it brief because it can't get long. But Siebel was founded by Tom Siebel in 1990, and he went ahead and started working in a small office. And there was another person, I can't remember her name right now, Ruth. Yeah, I won't take a chance on it, but basically there was two of them, and they founded the company, and they recognized that, hey, you know what, that more software was going to be needed for people to manage their clientele, right? And basically they started developing software. So they took advantage of the early 90s, the mid 90s, where software was becoming more prevalent in how companies operated their business. Right, so basically, in the mid 90s, they managed to get a good customer base. They were around, I would say, $500 million, $400 million in the mid 90s, and they managed to go to IPO. And they started with an IPO price in 2000, right, of $2.19, right? And now we have to remember what happened in 2001, right? We had the internet bubble, the crash. But in the year 2000, they went from $2.19 in that same year, they went to $120. Think about that, from $2.19 to $120 in stock price in the same year. So people saw the value of what they were bringing to market. Also, it jived. It was really in line with the changes that were occurring in the marketplace, and people saw, customers were able to increase their market share because of the software that they were using. And the other thing about Siebel CRM was that it was highly customizable, meaning that you can adapt it to your company's needs, right? It wasn't a one size fits all, right? And also they provided services. So that meant that for them, they generated even more revenue because they used their consultants to do these customizations, right? So basically by the year 2002, they had a 45% market share, which is unheard of in software for somebody to have 45% market share. And there were over $1 billion in revenue, about $1.2, $1.3 billion in revenue. And along came Oracle, right, and acquired them in 2005, 2006 for $5.8 billion, right? So think about Tom Siebel, think about that exit, right? He exited when the market had peaked. Now, Oracle was thinking, hey, you know what, I was a laggard, right? Let me take the market leader. But they're missing some of the point, right? Because just because you're big and can swallow up the market leader doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to be successful with that market leader, because the winds are changing and they failed to see that the winds were changing. So Oracle acquired Siebel in 2006 and they paid $5.8 billion, and their revenue decreased instead of increased. Now, one of the things that Oracle does traditionally is that they have a huge install base. So when they acquire a company, now they start pitching that to all of their install base. So the fact that they decreased in revenue told you that there were some headwinds there, and that there were some competitors coming into the marketplace that were driving those headwinds, and also changes that were occurring in the marketplace that were driving those headwinds. So basically, when you look at Oracle, it went from 1.4 billion in 2010. 4 years later, there were less than $1 billion in revenue, right? In 2022, they went from 45% market share down to 1.76 market share. What happened? Right? On-premise systems and the advent of the cloud SaaS horizon. So basically, when you think about it, on-premise systems is how everybody did business. You had to buy servers, you had to have network engineers, you had to have people that understood how to install workloads, get them working, right? Operating systems, like all those things started to change with the advent of cloud, right? So basically, the other changes were upfront license cost, right? So basically, when you think about it, you had upfront license cost, on-premise servers, annual maintenance fees on top of the upfront license cost, right? And you only had access from the office. So if I'm a salesperson, do I live in the office? Or am I on the road? If I have a salesperson that's in the office, I tell them, hey, you need to go see some customers, right? So in essence, that was another limiting factor, right? And they failed to see these things, that these things were going to change. So basically, when you look at Salesforce, right, it was founded by Mark Benioff in 1999, right? They were operating out of his office all the way into 2000. They were operating actually out of his home, right? And basically, he came up with this idea that why should we be installing software in every business, right? Why can't we just have one install base that can be customized, right? And then therefore, we don't have to do this reinstallation. That means that people don't have to buy hardware every time they buy software. They don't have to worry about their developers or their engineers installing code, right? They don't have to worry about, workload deployment. They don't have to worry about maintaining this, making sure that it's up and available, right, for their internal customers. So in essence, he went with a no coding, no software approach, which was very innovative in the mid-2000s, right? But he understood that with the advent of cloud and the fact that the upload speeds, download speeds were increasing, bandwidth was increasing, the advent of mobile handsets that you can have access to your apps anywhere, right? Gave him what I call an unfair advantage or a virtuous cycle, right? So basically, this innovative business model, again, is part of digital transformation. You have to innovate with your business model. Why? Because think about Oracle. Oracle was saying, hey, you know what? We're going to have so much in license sales to their boards and to their investors, right? And so we're gonna be doing so much. So many businesses are going to be using the product, right? And now you have these forecasts, and here comes a nimble player. So, oh, I can charge upfront costs. Oh, as a matter of fact, I'll give you 3 months. The first 3 months free, right? And then after that, you just put your credit card, and we'll start billing your credit card, right? So how do you compete, right? When your board is expecting a certain outcome, can you really go ahead and say, "Oh, I'm not going to charge license costs anymore"? That blows up your forecast. What happens to your stock? So the fact that you can come in with a business model that can become more defensible than the actual product. Business models are key, right, to being able to defend yourself in the marketplace when you're an entrant into the marketplace, right? So the fact that there were no licensing fees, no annual maintenance fees, you pay per user and only for the data that you uploaded into the system, right? So that's what I call a star was born. So in 2005, Salesforce had $176 million in revenue. By 2022, they went from less than 1% of the marketplace to 27.6% in the marketplace. You can go to the next slide, please. Yeah. So basically, here's the revenue curve for Salesforce, right? In 2010, they were 1.3 billion. By the year 2022, they're at 26.49 billion. If you look at Oracle today, Oracle as a whole is about 40 billion. And they have ERPs, they have a plethora of different products. And Salesforce, just sticking on the marketing and sales side, they're approaching or starting to catch Oracle, right? So that is the dynamic of understanding the marketplace, understanding the changes that are occurring in the marketplace, and the value of a business model, right? Understanding how to communicate with their customers. Salesforce was one of the first companies that started having these conventions where they invited all of their customers to know, hey, this is what we're doing next. And today, if you're gonna go to their convention, you have to book 8-9 months in advance just to get a hotel room. And they're able to charge $3,000 and $4,000 per entrance, right? So in essence, it became the darling of Silicon Valley. Why? Because they showed how to really treat the customer, and the fact that the customer was interested in actually participating in what the product needed to be, and they heard them and they made the necessary changes. So therefore, it became very, very sticky, and it's one of the most used CRMs today. Next slide. So really, as we look at these two case studies, right, what is it all about? So it's really not about technology, right? Because Oracle had the same access to the same technology as Salesforce did. So what is it about? It's about strategy and new ways of thinking. And really, that can be said for any size company, right? You could be a seller out in the street selling chapatis, right? Or you could be, a huge company, right? That has, tens of thousands of customers. But it really just comes down to these same things about strategy and new ways of thinking. If you can have new ways of thinking and adopt it and a good strategy, now you can start implementing your digital transformation, right? So let's read through these because this is very important, right? How to turn on the light. So basically, digital transformation closes the gap, right, between what digital customers already expect and what analog businesses actually deliver, right? So if we think about another case study that I didn't include was, BlackBerry and Apple. So BlackBerry had complete domination of the marketplace, right? But they had limitations in their user interface. And just because Apple was able to come up with a user interface that was very amenable to customers, they were able to displace BlackBerry. Even though Apple was not as secure as BlackBerry, they were still able to displace it. And even though many of the things that Apple did at the beginning were gimmicky, that you could pour a soda or a beer, really didn't mean anything. But guess what? It captured the attention, right? So that marketing aspect is critical, for companies to understand that, hey, you know what? You have to have some level of engagement with the clients to the point where they start talking about you, right? Because when they start talking about you, that's the way to get the word out and a way for getting interest in the marketplace, right? So digital transformation is the changes associated with the application of digital technology in all aspects of human society. So sometimes we get so serious with what we're doing that we cannot say a joke, that we cannot do something lighthearted, right? But those jokes and lighthearted things are what people are going to go talk about, right? So Apple started, with a young, trendy community, and they wound up taking over all of the businesses. So it's so important to be able to keep humor, to be able to understand that as serious as you may be, right, you need to be able to see all aspects of human society and be able to touch each and every one of those aspects in order for you to really become transformation, right? But when you look at digital transformation, it involves sometimes changing leadership. Sometimes people just don't want to change. They're set in their ways, and this is the way it's going to be. And they say everything under the sun has already been invented. Don't talk to me about that, right? So sometimes that leadership needs to go. I'm serious, right? So because you need a different mindset, right? Different set of thinking. So you need to encourage innovation, not stifle it, right? You need new business models. Everybody wanted to get millions of dollars up front for their software, right? So that's instant gratification, right? But some people say, hey, you know what? Why don't you do this for me? So I was just talking to the efficiency committee here for sale. Not sale, one of the government agencies, and he tells me, hey, you know what? We have a new business model. So we put out a tender for metering, for electric metering, and we're not going to put the upfront cost of the electric metering. We're passing that down to the installer, and then they can make their money 3 to 5 years later. So that just took a huge burden off the state to not have to come up with meters for millions of companies, right, in New Delhi. So you have to have new business models, right? You have to come up with innovative ways of thinking because the way that you approach the marketplace and the way that you acquire business will change, right? So now the responsibilities of efficiency are being handed down to some of the providers instead of the ownership being taken by the government, right? So having that increased use of technology and improving the experience of not only the organization's employees, customers, suppliers, partners, and stakeholders, because other times also we only focus on the customer. But if your employees can't have access to the information that they need, how can they really satisfy those customers, right? If your vendor needs to call you every time he needs to place an order, but he can't get you on the phone and you're not responding to your emails, there might be other ways for him to place that order, right? So basically, that's what I said. It touches all aspects. It's 360-degree view of your clients, of your vendors, of your customers, understanding who they are and how they want to interact with you in order for you to be successful today. So if we take a look at this chart here, right, digital technologies, they're disrupting all aspects, right? So if you look, 85% of the customer citizens engagement will be done without human interaction, right? This is by 2020. So you go today a lot of times to a website, and what's the person that approaches you? It's a chatbot, right? Now, what is the value of a chatbot? That means that I don't have to have somebody on site and ready to engage with, right? So basically, the idea is that, hey, even if you give them the semblance of, hey, you know what, we're going to get back to you later, we have your information, it provides a certain level of customer satisfaction, right? So if we look, 65% of today's children will work in new job types that don't exist yet. So back in 2007, right, or 2006, when Apple had their iPhone come out, did they ever think about influencers? That was not part of the equation. Now I speak with young kids today that, I want to be an influencer. Think about it. My wife, she's in the ag field, and she is a veterinarian, and she specializes in dairy science. And she works for a company that they sell dairy products. So they hired an influencer that had 3 million followers. And that influencer started promoting this company's products, Organic Valley's products. And the culmination of the promotion after a 3-month period was to host a subject matter expert from Organic Valley so that they can interact with her followers, this person's followers. So in that they had a 2-day session at specific times. And in the first day session, they had 385,000 people showed up for the interaction. Right? And they asked all sorts of different questions, right? And they were able to engage with that customer base. And wound up taking the company from an $800 million company, it turned it into a $1 billion company over a period of 8 months. So learning how to interact, right? Learning what the power of an influencer is, tells you that sometimes we don't even know what jobs are coming, right? So they were completely blind. They never thought that they would have that type of boomerang effect, right? So if you look here on the upper left, right, 90% of employees anticipate more competition for talent. I can tell you, look, India's a little bit different than the US, but the US has an education crisis. So today, about, I would say an average 40% of US teens are not graduating high school in the allotted 4 years. Only 34% of college entrants are actually graduating in 4 years. And that only jumps to about 57% after 6 years. So there's really going to be a dearth in the United States of talent, right? Especially now in a digital transformation age where you have to be technology savvy. And also a lot of people are becoming consumers of technology, not developers of technology in the US, right? So in essence, there's going to be a tremendous amount of competition in the US for those jobs. Why? Because there's not enough to go around, right? So that, poses an opportunity if the US, continues to have the H-1B programs and more open borders for talented people to come in. But that also poses challenges internally because you have a populace that is not able to keep up with the standards of living that are going to be disgruntled and upset. So, technology poses lots of challenges, right? And they're not easy ones to solve, right? But if you look here, 80% of digital leaders highlight new ways of working as a top enabler for their success. And I'll cover that in a little bit more. And 57% of jobs are at risk of automation. So basically, when you think about the 5 domains of digital transformation, right? So you have customers, right? Because you're trying to reinvent yourself and understand what are the core behaviors that customers are exhibiting so that you can adapt to it. You have competition, right? So before people had applications, right? But now people are building platforms. Going back to Salesforce started with the idea of, hey, providing the CRM in the cloud that anybody can access from anywhere. Right, but they realize that, hey, we don't really just have a software here. We can build a platform. So what is that platform? It's called Force.com. In Force.com, you can go today and say, hey, I want to use the Force.com platform to build my app, right? And what does Salesforce say? Okay, yeah, we give you security, we give you user management, we give you role management, we give you multi-tenancy. So everything is there for you to use. So it cuts down your development time tremendously, right? So basically, now they're saying, hey, we don't only have a software, we have a platform. So understanding how to unlock the value of what you have is critical in order to grow in the marketplace, right? So turning data into assets, right? So today, a lot of companies have reams of data, right? But they don't know what to do with that data, right? So being able to turn those data into assets is critical. Innovation, right? Innovation is also critical. Like I said before, innovation is just not in what you do, from a coding perspective or chemicals. Innovation can also be from a business model perspective, right? So understanding that innovation is not one-dimensional. When people think of innovation, they think of a brand new gadget, but really innovation can be a financial instrument, right? So in essence, innovation comes in different forms and from different angles, right? And lastly is value. If you're able to provide value, right, to your intended targets, the likelihood is that you will be successful. So let's think a little bit about customers and how they behave today, right? So before, customers were what we call passive targets, right, that we targeted, right? But really what they have become is dynamic networks. If we can go to the next slide. Yeah, so this is a really interesting slide. So before, customers would broadcast their information over radio, over TV, billboard ads, right? And any mass communication trying to get people to know who they are, right? But in reality, if you're able to take an influencer or customers that are really highly connected and are posting in different mediums, now you can leverage what we call the network effect of that particular customer that you have. So now that customer might be a YouTuber, he might be on Twitter, he might have his own blog, he might be on Instagram. And if you give them the incentive, right, or if you provide the right experience, guess what they're going to do? They're going to talk about, what they experienced when they engaged with your product. And now that has a boomerang effect. Why? Because if that person has 10,000 people that follow them and they post something about your company, guess what? At least a good percentage of the people that he's tagged are also going to forward that out. So in essence, more and more people start learning about you, and that's how you have that sort of boomerang effect. And just like Organic Valley, where my wife is working, the fact that this person had over 3 million followers and only 10% of them showed up for the event, right? Those talk to the other folks, and that's how they got that virtuous cycle going, where people started saying, hey, these are great products, there's no chemicals in them. They really treat their animals right. PETA, which is the animal welfare organization, certifies them. They inspect them, unannounced, right? So it really built up that network effect and really helped them grow. So in essence here, what are the strategies for leverage network customers, right? So one is access, right? So you have to be able to give those customers access to digital content. So before, people were very concerned with copyrighted materials, images, or whatever. But now, you can go on Google Images and all the companies have their logos there. Hey, you want to post my logo somewhere? Post it, right? Because they say all news is good news, right? Even bad news sometimes is good news because it gives you exposure, right? The other thing is engagement. Today, we have so many channels for engagement and they continue to evolve and change, right? We have even disappearing engagement, right? With Snapchat and all of that, right? So the ways that people engage, it's a sensory experience. So you think about it. Look, you're sitting in a bus. You see a person looking at a phone, and you'll see them swiping. So these psychologists have figured out that there's certain things that they can do to the human mind to keep people there, even though there's nothing there. They have infinite scrolling, right? Where you keep scrolling through. And they just keep changing the order of what they're presenting to you, and you don't realize it because it's just coming to you in different things, right? So basically, the way that you connect with your clients and the way that you collaborate with them is really gonna drive that network effect. So you want them sharing your content, you want them telling others about your content, right? You want to do not only this with customers, but I'll show you at the end of this presentation that you also want to do that with your competitors. Because it's always about getting the word out and the betterment of society, right? And that's the critical portion that we need to understand. A lot of times we want to have things that are at an arm's distance, when in reality we should be embracing. So we're going from what we call symmetric, right? Where we want to have things in line, to asymmetric, where things happen in a way that sometimes it's not logical, right? So if we look here, right? I call it frenemies, right? So have you ever heard that word frenemies? Friends that might be enemies, right? So changes in strategic assumptions from analog to digital age has changed how we view competition, right? So competition was defined in industries as those that are in your same space, that are competing for your same customers, right? But competition today is fluid across fluid industries, right? Clear distinctions between partners and rivals is blurred today, right? So sometimes partners and rivals have to join forces in order to keep at bay others that are trying to come into the space, right? Competition is used to be a zero-sum game, but today competitors cooperate in key areas, right? Key assets are held inside the firm, but now we have to find a way to leverage key assets to be accessed from outside the firm, right? So products with unique features and benefits, now we have platforms of partners who exchange value. Not only that, they allow you to customize it to however you want, right? So a few dominant competitors per category, now winner takes all due to networks. So what you've seen is in this effect is that we're seeing less and less competition. In the United States, when Amazon was allowed to how would I say, take investor money with no government policy to say, hey, you know what, you're dumping dollars into Amazon and it's killing our marketplace. Because the United States used to have a lot of mom and pop electronic stores, furniture stores, clothing stores, malls with all kinds of stores, right? But what happened if, the United States doesn't have a tariff on dumping dollars. Most people don't think about this. If India today say, you know what, I'm gonna dump steel into the United States, what's the United States gonna do? They're gonna put a tariff, right? Yet they say, hey, you know what? Money's a commodity just like steel is. But they say, you know what, you can dump as many dollars into a company and there's no tariff against it. In a way of thinking, right? So basically they allowed a company to take all kinds of money. They were not profitable for the first 15 or 20 years, right? And they were able to kill the competition. And now they own the entire marketplace. So even policy making has to be innovative. Amazon is allowed to set up a store and its own exchange. He knows if you have an Amazon store and you're selling really well, they know who your customers are, they know your prices, they know where you get your products, and the government allows them to set up a store to compete with you. So even policy needs to be part of this digital transformation. It is so critical, but it's so overlooked. Why? Because now that allows for winners to take all. That means that there's very limited competition, right? And that poses a real threat for us as customers. So really, this digital age of transformation extends beyond technology. This is so critical to understand, right? So from silo to strategic assets. And why do I say that, right? Because we live in today what's called the API economy. So what is the API economy? It's all about wrapping software with an advanced programming interface that allows customers, right, to engage or competitors to engage with you in a manner that you dictate. So now you're able to take that data, right, that was very expensive to generate, right, and that's continuously generated as you operate as a company, and you're able to turn it into an asset, right? So you took on that challenge and say, hey, you know what, I'm going to put an API around this data, I'm going to structure it, right, and I'm going to get value out of it, right? So data is a key intangible asset for value creation. Now your customers can access that data. If you want to charge a fee for that data, you can, right? Or if you want to give it for free, you can, but at least you have control of it, right? And you're able to meter it as you see fit, right? So data is critical in this information age, and I'll talk a little bit about it in AI. So let's move on. Yeah, so data is what we call the new oil. Data is the key to competitiveness, right? So if you look at the Harvard Business Review, they came up with this article, and data creates a competitive advantage, right? New technologies make data-enabled learning much more powerful than customers' insights produced in the past, right? So basically, go ahead, right? So AI, what does it do really, really well? Large data sets, right? So basically AI will become pivotal to most, if not all, digital transformations, right? Oh, go back here. AI will help boost worker productivity. The only worker that's going to get obsoleted is the one that does not learn to use AI to be more efficient. So really it's about people over AI, because AI cannot do it in and of itself, right? So if you understand that AI needs people, right, then there's no longer to have a fear of AI. It's for those that don't use it to their advantage that should be feared. Yeah, so what is this all about, right? If you think about enhancing processes, right? It's only a matter of how quickly digital transformation and I will completely converge in all aspects, right? So we've talked about software. Now we're talking about specific instances of how you use AI within your organization. So today they have AI where it's being used in HR as a way to screen applicants, right? So you have tens of thousands of applicants that apply, and then they'll have a learning language model that is able to analyze if the job description that's given, if that is seen within his resume. If it is, it gets categorized to one side, right? And the ones that are not are cast aside. So if you're a recruiter, instead of looking at 10,000 applications, you might have to look at 60, Big difference in efficiency, right? You might spend a week or more sifting through 10,000 applications, but you can do that in a couple of hours to look through 60 applications. So this is what I'm saying, that AI is going to be increasing the distance between digital transformation leaders and the laggards, meaning that if you don't use AI in your talent resourcing, like I said, it's going to be very competitive. I think that's something that you do, Manas, right? The fact is that you're not going to be able to compete. Why? Because by the time you find the resource that you can present to that customer, guess what? This other person, they already have them working. Right? So that's what it's all about, right? Yeah, but if you can go to the next slide, please. Yep, so AI's ability to collect and analyze vast amounts of data is going to boost productivity, improve business processes. It's going to improve the data-driven decisions. It's going to optimize processes. It's going to enhance customer experiences, and overall, it's going to drive efficiency, right? AI is enabling multi-channel communications, right? Through Facebook Messenger, through Twitter, through WhatsApp, text messaging, web widgets, chatbots. In our case, we developed a chatbot or a web widget that you could order food through a conversation. Now, the same code base that we developed, you can call. You could be driving your car. You can call and say, hey, you know what? I want to place an order, and the virtual agent would engage with you. Okay, thank you, Mr. Caines, for calling us back. Would you like the same thing as last time? And you can say, yeah, the same as last time. Okay, that is an egusi with fish, with horchata drink. Would there be anything else, sir? So basically, you could be driving and placing an order, and the credit card we have on file, do you want to use that for the payment, sir? Yes, and we would take, the payment, right? And you want that delivered, or you're going to be picking it up? Please have it delivered. So basically, we are able to engage that through phone, do the same conversation through Facebook Messenger, have the same conversation through Twitter, have the same conversation through WhatsApp, through text messaging. It's all leveraging, right, the same code base in the back. So it's all about being where your users are at. If I'm in a conversation on Facebook, why should I have to get out of Facebook, right, to go and engage in another site when I can do it right from Facebook? If I'm talking about the best dum biryani in town on Facebook, why can't I order the same dum biryani in town from right there on Facebook? Why do I have to go to that website? You follow me? So that's where artificial intelligence is taking us. It's multi-channel, right? And if you do it right, you can leverage the same code base irrespective of channel. And in multiple modalities, whether you're texting, whether you're speaking, right? So it's really dynamic from that perspective. Yep. The other part is, like I said, meeting where the clients are at, right? So being able to resolve issues. A lot of times you're driving in the car and you shouldn't be texting, right? So the fact that you're able to resolve the issue, that you can speak and place the order, right? And you don't have to even engage with somebody directly at a restaurant, it's a big deal, right? I'll give you another example of something that we built. So there's a company called Authorized out of Marin, California, and they provide engineering software for architects and designers. And basically they say, hey, you know what, we have this issue. 85% of the calls that we get in customer service are to change the number of licenses or the licenses where they are in terms of region. So we would like to see if we could do that through an agent, a virtual agent. And so we worked with them. And we made it such that we could validate who the client was. We were able to identify, the number of licenses that they had. We were able to change the region or the number of licenses, right? And then we were able to send them a confirmation of everything that was done via email, right? So that agent today is called Otto, right? And it's on their website. So the fact that they didn't have to engage their customer service with this mundane task, and it could be done with something like a chatbot, freed up their customer service to deal with more pressing issues. So that is the value that AI brings to the table, right? And then the last thing is, large language models, right, are going to be leveraged with past use cases. So like I said, companies have a lot of data. And the good things with generative AI is that it's able to take all that data, and now you're able to start making sense of it, right? So you're going to be able to have it. The first place where this is going to occur is going to be in customer service. Why? Because customer service is a high turnover area, right? And a lot of times you have to train that customer service agent before he can start engaging, right, with your clients. Now, when he has a large language model, right, that he can prompt, he's gonna be able to provide much better answers to the customers and satisfy them than having to wait 3 months down the line when he feels like he's ready to engage with the customers, right? So that means that we're able to bring that customer service agent up to speed in a week instead of it taking 4 weeks, 5 weeks before they can start interacting. Right? So if you can go one more up, yeah. So basically, what's going on is that we have to start transforming in different ways, right? So Starbucks is one of those companies that recognized that they needed to transform, they needed to engage with their clients a little bit better, right? So they started asking their clients to vote, right? To submit suggestions, right? And Starbucks started evaluating those things. What did you like best about Starbucks? You know, which pastries do you like more? You know, they were saying, hey, you know what, although we're seeing, you know, we have this chai latte is the highest selling, you know, is there something else that we should be providing you, right? So basically they started getting ideas for their customers, and those ideas turned into different offerings from Starbucks. They started doing a happy hour, right? They started providing free Wi-Fi because people wanted to stay in their offices, in their premises to work, right? So basically, because they listened to their customer base, they were able to dynamically change the way they engage with their customers. They added new flavors that customers were asking for that were not there before, right? So that has allowed them to maintain their market share and remain competitive in the marketplace. Right, so here's one of the most interesting examples that I've seen of competition or frenemies. So Burger King and McDonald's, this is in Argentina, they say a day without the Whopper. And what they do is that they donate this money to children with cancer. All the money that McDonald's makes on that day, they donate it to children's cancer. And what Burger King does is that they close their stores on that day, and they send their customers over to McDonald's. Think about it. They're sending their customers over to McDonald's, and they say, hey, you know what, go to McDonald's because all the sales today are gonna be donated to children's cancer. So here you have some frenemies, people that fight over turf, saying, hey, you know what, let's get together and do something positive, right, for society. So what does that do for Burger King? It says, hey, you know what, I wanna go back to Burger King because they're doing something really cool. So the way that the world is turning and changing is completely different than how it was anticipated. The fact that you can engage with a competitor and create a virtuous cycle, right, is something that is beautiful, right? So in essence, that's how we need to think. We need to think out of the box, right? We can't just think that we need to beat up our competitor. Maybe there's certain times where we can work together as competitors. Right, and we need to find those things that we have in common that we care about and start there. Right, so let's think a little bit about changes in strategic assumptions, right? Just like Burger King and McDonald's, right? So before, decisions made based on intuition and seniority, right? But today, decisions are made based on testing, validating, and using AI to deliver valuable insights, right? So that is critical. Before, you know, we used to do testing ideas was expensive, slow, and difficult. The most critical thing is to test ideas today is cheap, fast, and easy, right? So experiments conducted, you know, were infrequently. Today, you want to be experimenting on a weekly basis, right? So challenge of innovation is to find the right solution. The challenge of innovation is to solve the right problem. Everybody's always trying to think of the right solution, but most people are focusing on the wrong thing. And that's the most challenging, right? That really requires forethought, right? Before, failure was avoided at all costs. Think about it. I've gone to companies that say, hey, why use IBM for this product? Oh, because if it goes bad, you know, it's IBM. You know, it's that's the breed, right? Think about that mentality. They're paying a plus, right? Instead of saying, hey, you know what? Why don't we learn from our prior failure? You know, let's do something small, let's do it fast, and let's do it cheaply, right? I'll give you an example. So I bid on a project for a company in Boston, and basically there were 5 bidders, IBM, it was us, and we're an IBM partner. And basically, although we were one of the lowest bidders, we did not get selected. for the project. So after the project was awarded to IBM came to us and said, hey, we don't have the bandwidth. We want you to deliver the project. So when we showed up to the office, the manager says, oh, you guys didn't win the bid. Why are you here? So, well, we're an IBM partner and they want us to deliver the project. So he goes, but you guys are one of the lowest bidders. If I'd have known that, I would have given you the bid. You follow me? So he was trying to avoid failure because he said, hey, you know what? These guys are small compared to IBM. But unbeknownst to him, a lot of times we're the ones delivering the product for IBM. So sometimes instead of doing a large project, right, that has a large exposure, do a small project. And see how it goes. And if it goes well, then you build on top of that. So that, sometimes it's not rocket science. Sometimes it's just stepping back and seeing what to focus on and how to go about doing things, right? So the other thing is from defending to adapting, right? So a lot of times we're defending our turf, right? So basically, when you think about industries, right, it was all about, hey, what's the value proposition for my industry? How does my industry operate, right? But today is what the value proposition is being defined by changing customer needs. So Starbucks never thought they would be in the Wi-Fi business or the happy hour business. That was for a bar, right? So Wi-Fi was for a library, right? But because customers now started having that need and they started asking their customers, they were able to adapt, right? So before it was that execute your current value proposition. Today, no, it's uncover the next opportunity for customer value. Because the longer you keep a customer on your premises, what are the chances that they're going to spend more? So again, it's shifting the way that you think, right? Optimizing your business model as long as possible. Evolve before you must, right? So stay ahead of the curve. Right? So you have to be able to judge change by how it could create your next business. Right? So when you look at Fujifilm, they never thought they would be in cosmetics. But they realized that in their chemicals department, they had all the ingredients to develop cosmetics. Right? So in essence, we need to learn how to take the assets that we have and use them in different ways that drive value. Right? So, and like I said, it's multi-dimensional. So here we have these famous American hip hop artists, right? And the Metropolitan Museum of Art decided to take them on. So if you go next, they realized that they had a huge, they weren't getting young kids to come to the art museum. So what they did was they took these hip hop artists and they did a remix or compilation of all their music, and they allowed youngsters to start playing with it. Mixing different things together, taking the words from this one and placing it on this one's rhythms, right? So by doing this, guess what happened with all these youngsters? They started coming to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, right? Because it was relevant to them, right? So they started saying, hey, our competition is not other museums. Our competition is Netflix, right? Our competition is Facebook. Our competition is YouTube, right? We're fighting this engagement, right? Because when you go to a museum, you're engaging, you're part of an experience. And I don't care what business you're in, there's always a level of customer experience, right? And there's a saying that says, right, I might not remember what you said, but I definitely will remember how you made me feel. And that is so critical today, right? So think about this saying, by 2025, the biggest bank, right? The biggest financial institution might not be a bank at all, right? Let's think about this. How many of you know about frequent flyer miles? Have any of you participated in a frequent flyer program? Do you realize that, let's say American Airlines, you know what the value of their frequent flyer program is? It's valued at $3 billion. For United Airlines, which has the highest number of frequent flyers, their program is valued at $22 billion. That's outside of their core business. And how do they do that? Think about it. There's some banks that don't have $22 billion in reserves. Isn't that incredible? So that's the value of having the right business model. Being able to engage with your customers. That a side job or a side hustle turn into being more valuable than the actual core company. Next slide, please. Yep. So again, let's think about shifting and what we call strategic assumptions, right? So again, we always have to take the customer into account. We have to harness that customer networks, right? We always have to look at the competition, but not as a rivalry, right? We need to say, hey, you know what? How can we have co-opetition, right? How can we work together, right? We need to look at converting data into valuable assets for us, right? And we need to look at innovation, right, in multiple ways. So a lot of times we're thinking to innovate is to develop a patent. No, let's innovate by developing new business models. Let's innovate by developing policy, governance, right? And then the other thing is adapting your value proposition. Your value proposition will change over time. Like I said, Starbucks never provided Wi-Fi. They started providing Wi-Fi. Now when the customers stay longer, they spend more money, right? So basically, adapting to the needs of your customers is going to be beneficial for you. Also, the other part is the digital transformation playbook, right? So when you look at it, you have those 5 domains: customers, competition, data, innovation, right? And basically in data. So basically what you need to look at is what are the key concepts, how to reinvent yourself, right? So harness the customers and leverage the networks that they're participating in, right? Look at your data as a way that you can build a platform, right? So that others can access it, and you're able to generate revenue from it, right? Look at ways to turn those data, like I said, into assets. Maybe you can provide templates, recipes, things that people can use really quickly that are engaging and can help you win those customers over, right? And like I said, you want to fail early and often by doing small projects that are not costly and not going to cost your job or not, going to cost the company much. But basically, if it's successful, you take what's successful, what failed, you leave it by the side. So iterate constantly, right? And then understand the concepts of market value. Understand what your customers value so that you can use those, right, to extend your business. Right? So innovation is the only way to grow, right? The only way to win. And this is Steve Jobs, and he's done, his company has done a marvelous job in that area. If we go to the next slide, please. Right? So digital transformation, again, is not about technology, right? It's about strategy. It's about leaderships. It's about new ways of thinking, right? What you do is that once you have that strategy, once you have the new ways of thinking, once you know what you do, you go out there and you find out what is the best technology to achieve that. Right? Next slide. So digital transformation, right? Are you ready? Yep. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Arturo.
You're welcome.
All right. So in the interest of time, what we will do is we will go to the audience and get some questions.
For sure.
Yeah. Question?
Yeah, it's ready.
All right. So to the audience, you can mention your questions in the chat box. You have any questions?
No, not.
Starbucks today. Stage. Yeah, we are. Yeah.
All right. While questions come in, I have a question personally.
Yes.
I double with AI, GenAI a little bit. How do you think is the state of play among enterprises as far as GenAI use case implementation side?
So yeah, so Gen AI is, again, it's a battlefield. A lot of people, if you want to understand what's going on with Gen AI, look up at a lawsuit that was just filed on February 28th by Elon Musk. If you download the document, you will get a full view of where we're at with Gen AI today and what are the fears and what we see into the future. Right? So I'll give this little backdrop and then I'll answer your question. So today, the idea with Gen AI and especially Open AI was the fact that it was supposed to be available to all, right? But like anything else, right, in the marketplace, there's always going to be players that are large that are going to try to sort of dominate the space. And in this case, Microsoft signed a secret deal with OpenAI to gain access to the development work that was done at OpenAI, right? But the fact of the matter is that Elon Musk was the founder, along with Altman, of OpenAI. And in its articles of incorporation, it says that you can now form this as a private corporation, right? It says that this has to be available to the public, right? And it cannot be the exclusive domain of any one private company. So they've already violated their tenet, right, of what OpenAI was, right? So in essence, the reason I tell you that is because, Microsoft now has said, you know what, the agreement that they have with OpenAI is that they will continue to gain access to the software as long as they don't reach what's called accepted general intelligence, right? Which is really not defined. So they can keep getting access to the software forever. So Elon Musk is trying to put a stop to that in two ways. One is by this lawsuit, and the other one is by he's got a new open project called Grok, right, that people are using in order to sort of combat this I would say trying to take over the technology by Microsoft. But going back to where our companies today, utilizing the product. So the product is being utilized in many areas. One of the biggest areas that is being utilized is healthcare, right? So they're taking a lot of x-rays and images that they know that the person develops some type of cancer, and they're feeding this into the model, right? And then the model now is able to take all those millions of images and identify things that it starts recognizing that even though it doesn't show us cancers today, it will be cancers in a year, or will be cancers in 2 years as a way to identify, right? Because the difference between what we call narrow AI and Gen AI is that Gen AI is able to iterate on its own, right? Where narrow AI, the programmer has to continue to feed it information, right? It needs to label it, needs to identify it, and needs to sort of teach it that this is what it is, right? But with Gen AI, no. The models that are there in Gen AI, right, allow it to sort of keep learning on its own, right? And then the other most important thing about it is that the first answer that you get from Gen AI is not necessarily the best answer. So the other things that people are learning is that they need to learn how to prompt Gen AI to ask it, hey, what can you improve on this, right? So we're moving to more of what's called an agentic model. An agentic is a large language model that you have agents that do certain activities, right? So just like in narrow AI, right, you have something that's very narrow and task specific. They're now starting to develop sort of that same ideology inside of Gen AI in order to sort of improve the process. So basically, that's the way they do it. So we're in the code development space, right? So we develop code, right? So we have these sprints, right? But then we have what we call QA, right? So basically, you can ask Gen AI, hey, you know what? Why don't you write code for the game Go? And it'll write the code for the game Go. You take that code, you try to play it, it doesn't work, right? So now what you do is that instead of you checking it, you can have an agent that all it does is QA.
Yeah.
Right? So now the agent received the code that was generated by Gen AI the first time. He checks it, and then he returns it back and say, "Hey, I found this error. It's not doing this." Then Gen AI says, "Oh, let me fix that." Follow me? So now you're able to go back and forth by having different agents, right? So if you think about it, you have an editor, a newspaper, right? What does he do? He proofreads the journalist's article, right? Before it gets published. So you can build the same thing, right? You can have that virtual cycle where you have 2, 3 different players, and you can build those today as agents that have a very specific task within a general, intelligence model. Right? So that's where we are today. That companies are starting to now use that agent-based ideology in order to improve the results. On average, they say that the results of what we call zero shot, the first time that you do something, you ask it for something, it's only 48% correct. And that's why you need an expert to be analyzing what it's giving you to make sure that it makes sense. And that's why I said that, the AI is not going to obsolete people's jobs. You have to learn how to use AI to do a better job. Yeah.
Good. All right. Do you have any questions? All right. So in the transformations, you have alluded to a lot of strategy points. Can you mention a couple of stumbling blocks which are commonly faced by your organizations?
Yes, organizations face a stumbling block of still afraid to fail.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Oh,
Cultures.
yeah. So everybody, and it's part of our culture, right? Nobody wants to fail, but that's really what we learn.
Yeah.
If we think as parents, right, how we deal with our kids, a lot of times we're shielding them, right, from failure, right? And then later on, we learn that maybe that was not the best policy, right? So a lot of times, we're not letting our kids work at an early age because, they should be focused on their studies. But they don't learn how to multitask, how to manage their time. So in essence, the biggest challenge that we have as a culture is allowing ourselves to fail and not feel bad about it.
Absolutely.
The same thing as companies, right? Allowing ourselves to build small projects that we can test. And it's okay, if we lose $10,000 or whatever the case may be, depending on your company is, but at least we learn what doesn't work. So that's the fundamental challenge that we need to overcome as humans is the fear of failure. It's okay to fail. It's not okay to stay down and not do anything about it.
Absolutely, and this generation, it's changing. Parents are more conscious about the kids' ability or their awareness about the fact that failure is not actually what used to be our perception of failure. It's actually learning. You learn, you get exposed, you learn to get around that problem and solve it next time.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, I come from a society where if I was to drop that cup and it would break, I would get a spanking from my mom, right? And that was like a natural instinct, right? And with my kids, I always say I will not do that. I would just tell them, hey, be more careful the next time, because I learned like that was of no value, right? So it was reactive nature, right? But in reality, we need to say that it was not on purpose, right? So in essence, it's the same way with business. A lot of times we want to look down upon those that didn't do well, that didn't fail. The problem is that you set them up for failure. You get on this huge task with limited tools and you expected them to work magic. Where if you'd have broken those tasks into more manageable tasks in short duration spans and you build success early, then you build the confidence to move forward.
Absolutely. It's also my ability that we need to work on to do more with limited resources, because that's what the world is about, right?
Mm-hmm.
You always have limited resources, and we are expected to do more.
That's right.
That's how we win in the competitive world, not all around. You can pump in a lot of money into a project and make it a big success, but whether you are making money actually,
That's another story.
whether it was worthwhile.
Yes.
All right, great. Thank you, Arturo. I think we can conclude.
Oh, man. Thank you so much.
Please.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So little talking about this.
Photos.
Oh,
Thank you, and it was wonderful, very insightful, and our gratitude from BCIC.
thank you so
Great
much.
to have you here today.
Thank you
Yes,
for giving
thank you,
this
thank you.
opportunity, and
Thank you.
very, very, actually, it mental transformation happened during this session.
All right. Thank you to the audience. You can feel free to reach out to me at any time.
Absolutely. All right, again, thanks to all of you who have joined online, and we will conclude the session now. Thank you very much.